This episode of The Marketing Show is brought to you by Quest, New Zealand's most respected digital marketing agency, where marketing is made easy.
Welcome to The Marketing Show, a show specifically dedicated to helping marketers learn and succeed. In this episode, you'll meet Jason Gordon of Zero Light Photography. He's got a really interesting story to tell. So let's get started. Jason, thanks so much for being with us on The Marketing Show. We really appreciate your time. I know you've just come back from a shoot in Wellington.
Pretty full weekend that was.
So can you tell us a little bit about how you got started in the first place in photography?
Well, it was sort of almost by accident, really. My mum was getting into photography and thought I'd jump in with a bit of Photoshop experience, and kind of went from there, really.
So you've got skill with photography, obviously, but also that post-production piece that most people don't really understand what happens there. So tell us a little bit about that. Once the photography's captured, what's the process from there?
Depends on how far you want to go, really. I mean, my style's pretty stylized. I mean, you can do as little as just output to internet if you want to, but I tend to do a little more than that.
So that leads us, I guess, really into Zero Light Photography and the studio and everything you've set up over the last few years. So what would be your specialist area, would you say?
The main thing I do is cars and commercial things, like products and so on. I mean, the reason the studio is so big is to fit vehicles in it. I mean, I do tend to do quite, as I say, heavily stylized things, more glossy magazine sort of style. I do like a good natural looking shot, but it's more challenging to start something from scratch and build it up slowly with light, you know.
So the amount of time you spend actually doing the photography versus post-production would be very, very different, right?
Well, I mean, for most people, post-production's the smaller part of it, apart from perhaps the sorting of the photos and so forth. For me, it's almost half and half, maybe a little more sometimes in post, depending on the shoot. If it's just a quick sort of in and out kind of product shot type setup, I try and get it as locked down as possible and do as little work in post as I can. But for a lot of the more interesting shots, then yeah, you can spend a few hours on a single photo.
Now you mentioned cars. What sort of vehicles have you photographed and what sort of clients have you had?
Everything. So from dealers just doing their daily trade me shots and that kind of thing, all the way up to Ferraris and that kind of jazz.
Did I just hear Ferrari's a client of yours?
No, not Ferrari themselves. no, just private dudes, just wanting a photo of their car they love so much, you know.
And the magazine stuff that you've done, obviously that's a bit different sort of client again.
Yep. I mean, a lot of it, especially in the car world, just the style that tends to be in the magazine is usually quite pushed. It's not overly natural. It's very solid colors or just interesting looking compositions and so forth, which suits well to the studio. You can do that kind of thing on location with like light painting and interesting other techniques and so forth, but it's a hell of a lot easier in a studio. You can just start from scratch and build it up from there.
So that high end is all about uniqueness, isn't it? Capturing a really unique look, something that would get people's attention and get them to really hover over an image and study it and, exactly. and take in what it's all about. The other skill I know that you've got is animation, and that was something that you formerly studied, wasn't it?
Soon after high school I went up to Auckland just to sort of learn how to do it, because I was interested in it, just wanted to know really. I didn't really have a career in mind, but I just was interested. But since then did a bit of freelance work and eventually made my way to Weta down in Wellington and spent a few years there, but ultimately came back to photography just because it allows a bit of freedom, especially if you've got your own studio.
Right, so just thinking about that, obviously you've done a lot of work with Quest Marketing, and before you did that, your work and your skills were more finely honed in Wellington, weren't they? You were picked up by Weta Studios.
That's the one, Weta Digital, yeah.
So tell us about that. What was the process like and what were the projects you worked on?
I mean, it's always a bit different in a large company like that, no matter what the company is. You do tend to sort of focus on one smaller aspect because there's that many people they can specialize, you know. So I was doing more the digital models, and so building the sets, the digital sets, and making, you know, props and things like that. Yeah, it was definitely an interesting exercise because there's just people from all around the world there. There's only a third of the people there are Kiwis, so it was definitely a good place, a good melting pot kind of a place.
You were picking up ideas and skills from others,
Yeah,
I guess. That would have been good.
absolutely.
How many of you in the animation department?
Well, just in the company, in the digital side, was about 1,600 when I was there.
Gosh,
so it's a
what
small
huge.
city.
And so the first project you worked on, what movie was that?
I got picked up for the Hobbit movies, the three of them, and yeah, that spanned a few years. But in between those, various other, you know, superhero movies and little bits and pieces here and there, you know.
I seem to remember you mentioning Iron Man 3 was another one that people might know.
Yep. Worked on a couple of suits. Yeah.
So that sort of work, incredibly intense when it's happening. It's all about putting in the hours, isn't it, for the result that the director or the creative team are trying to achieve. You've obviously decided at some point, at the end of maybe that last project, that it was time for a change.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, you pretty much nailed it there. There's definitely a lot of hours involved, but it's just nice to kind of have a little bit more creative freedom doing your own thing, you know. Obviously there's downsides to working for yourself. You got to find your own work, but it's definitely more freeing. In a company like that, you've got a little bit of creative input, but it's definitely nice to kind of have your own workflow.
You mentioned, you know, setting up your own business, and here we are today, obviously in the Zero Light studio. Mm-hmm. You're focusing, as you mentioned, on, you know, you built this for car photography. What have you learnt, I guess, in terms of marketing? If we think about marketing specifically now, what did you learn from that Hollywood model? What were the key learnings, do you think, that they were grappling with around marketing? Because I think the people watching this now will be interested to see the parallels there with their own businesses and how they need to market and be noticed in the marketplace. It's incredibly competitive in everyone's market. Hollywood's obviously no different. What would be your key observations about lessons learned in terms of how they're marketing these large-scale movies now?
Yeah, I mean, I was fairly locked down in the basement of that company, to be honest, but it was a lot of it is more just, especially on the marketing side, the part that sort of gets thrown at the public while they're trying to get eyes on is usually just, it's usually directed at be very shiny and very simple with your the thing you're trying to portray. Like, don't try and say too many things at once, really. And if you need to say a lot of things, split it up.
You mentioned to me earlier, though, uniqueness, and that's something that obviously is a consistent theme through any business. How do you see them driving down the path of that? I mean, just recently, obviously, we've seen a variety of movies up at the Oscars for awards, and some of those were very much unique. There are more challenges involved in making those happen.
From a company like Weta, their uniqueness is a lot involved in their tools and their process. That's how they market themselves to the studios. As far as the movies are concerned, there's a bit more of a push these days because there's that many popcorn films, as it were, available now. They're sort of soaking up a lot of the money. But because there's so much of that, there's a bit more push towards the more heartfelt, story-driven stuff. So I suppose it's a matter of finding your angle, really, and pushing hard with that.
Pushing hard with story, right?
Yeah. It's I mean, it's difficult for that particular market, but it's I mean, it's finding your own voice really is a key part. Knowing what you are and what you're going for really helps. Not trying to be too many different things. Don't try and be something for everybody. Is usually like that. That's the scene away from the popcorn film kind of market, if you know what I mean.
So that uniqueness again, and yeah, don't try and cover all bases. Be quite singular in your approach, right?
Yeah.
And you mentioned earlier, I thought it was interesting your comment about Weta and itself. I mean, having to market itself to Hollywood, in fact, as a service provider. How have they been effective doing that?
It's mostly their tools and their process. So everyone knows, especially in the scene, they know that Weta is good for their creatures and their fur effects and large scale kind of setups. So they go to them for that, really. And also they're Kiwis, so they're really easy to work with. You know, they've got that kind of can-do attitude, and just kind of get everything done. With minimal whining. There's a lot of that is involved as well, but yeah, primarily speaking, they've got a lot of good tech on hand, some good minds, and they push that.
What have been your challenges in reaching the marketplace and growing your own business? As you said, it's nice to have that autonomy, but it's also really challenging, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it's just getting out there and speaking with people. And I mean, speaking of marketing, like just talking to people, you are marketing yourself. So just being aware that you are a product when you're your own business. So just having that in the back of your mind, and just whenever you're speaking with someone, just try and bring up something about what it is that you're doing, you know, and it really helps, because, you know, they might just happen to be looking for something like that, or know somebody that's looking, or it might just spark an idea in their brain. Actually, I could probably do that for my business, you know.
Yeah, I agree with you. I really think that face-to-face part is critically important. And as salespeople, we all know that it's all about getting face-to-face with your customer. And then, of course, once you've got that attention, it's what do you do next, isn't it? Now, in addition to your face-to-face work and getting out there and networking with, I imagine you've got a database of some description, but it'll be quite a niche one. It seems like you've got private clients, you've got companies with large car fleets that they need to move, and you've also got the high-end magazines type clients. What else are you doing? I'm thinking now around digital and obviously your skill there. What sort of emphasis did you put on your digital marketing, and what have you done? Yeah,
well, most of it's just based around the social media. The nature of photography, a lot of it's just sort of word of mouth. Not many people just search for a photographer. They'll usually, especially these days, they'll try and either look for reviews or ask friends, you know, who do you think is good? Have you had somebody in the past? So a lot of it is just kind of just getting out there on social media and trying to generate some comments and so forth, just to get people engaged so that other people can see that work and see, you know, how it's received and all that kind of thing. Because it's a very visual medium, much like obviously the marketing and so forth, it's a matter of just getting a lot of that medium out there, you know, like just getting it in front of eyeballs. So what are the key channels you're using in terms of social that are really working for you? Yeah, I mean, these days, realistically, it's Instagram. Unfortunately, as far as the photography is concerned, it's not the nicest. It's highly visual, right? It's not the nicest platform as far as the file qualities, but that's where everyone is. So you have to be pretty cognizant of that. It'll be nice if everyone just came to your website, because then you can display it how you want to. But that's not really the case these days. So obviously you can try and drive a little bit of traffic that way through Google's SEO and that kind of thing. But most of it is Instagram and Facebook, really. I've seen some really interesting work recently that you've done with a model, and it looks much more like World of Wearable Arts type material. What can you tell us about that? Yeah, well, I'm doing a few more, I guess you could call them portraits, but it's more just character style. It's partially from my background in movies and visual effects. I trying to recreate a lot of scenes from movies and games and that kind of thing. And then there's no shortage of talent in New Zealand, so it's nice to be able to sort of play around with some of those ideas. Finally, Jason, I guess what would be your, just thinking about, you know, someone that might be watching this interview today and wanting to learn and get more insight about marketing, what would
be your key advice for someone wanting to grow their business or remain competitive in a marketplace which isn't getting any easier in which to get your message out there, is it?
It's the communication with the networking and so forth. Being approachable and just being ready to talk, really. There's plenty of people that only focus on the work and don't really focus on why they're doing the work.
Because you're in an industry, aren't you, where there are some egos, there are some people who would just stand behind their work and go, well, that's great, come and place your order, but it doesn't work that way, does it?
Yeah, well, as you said, it's a pretty saturated market, especially the photography, because there's a pretty low barrier for entry. Anyone can buy a camera these days. So it's a matter of being, obviously you have to be good at your craft, but that's only part of it. The rest of it is, just being good to work with and hoping for that sort of knock-on referral kind of thing. And
finally, what sort of role do you think uniqueness has to play in that whole mix as well, in terms of actually the what you're doing and deliberately crafting out a product or a service that's truly unique in the market?
Yeah, well, I mean, it gives you a point of interest, doesn't it? It's something different because it's that saturated. Everybody sees the same thing all the time, and if you can inject a little bit of something interesting, then that's shareable. It's mostly just to stand out, just somehow, just a little. It doesn't have to be something major, just a little bit that makes it interesting for people that are viewing it. Yeah.
Jason, thanks so much for being part of the marketing show today. We really appreciate your time. And thanks so much again for also having us in your studio here. It's a great facility for us to be able to use.
Indeed, no problem.
That's the latest episode of the Quest Marketing Show. Thanks so much for being with us here today. Remember, you can get the full interview via podcast, so check out our website. We'd also love to hear from you and about your key marketing challenges. See you next time on the Marketing Show.
This episode of The Marketing Show has been brought to you by Quest, New Zealand's most respected digital marketing agency. Thanks to our production crew, and don't forget to join us next time on The Marketing Show.